Hello and welcome to another episode of Wind, Waves and Wells with Joe. This week's episode, we dive into one of the most catastrophic offshore events the world has ever seen. On the 20th of April 2010, 11 men died and an incredible amount of oil spilled into the Gulf of Mexico. I was really fortunate enough to get a hold of Leo, who survived that night and had a little bit of luck in his survival, and another incredibly brave man who was willing to come on to the show and discuss his views and the post events of what happened and just the lay of the land of what really is going on. So part one of my episode with Leo Lindner. Leo, thanks so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it.
Oh, Joe, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you very much for asking me.
No, I spent a bit of time doing a bit of research into you, so and trying to hunt you down. So I'm delighted that I've caught you.
Well, yeah, I'm pretty elusive prey. I am. Yeah, I've got to recede it.
Before, obviously, ultimately, Deepwater Horizon. What was your path to the offshore?
What's that now?
What was your path towards the offshore industry before Deepwater?
How did I? Really. Actually, my first job offshore was a deckhand. It was a deckhand for Zapata Gulf. It was a boat company. We were pulling anchors for lay barges, right? Kellogg, Brown, and Root were laying pipe to a production platform, and we were out there on the tugboat. And they had a series of anchors. And when the lay barge had gone to a certain point, we'd go out and pull the anchors moving forward so they can keep laying the pipe to the ship. And that was quite an experience. It was my first hitch was a month. And when I got out there, it was 20-foot seas. Now, Joe, I'd been on a boat. But I'd never been in 20-foot seas. Of course, you in the North Sea, I bet that 20-foot seas is like a calm day.
Good senator.
Yeah, right. But I've never been sicker on the crew boat. But that was like my first job offshore. But I was teaching English at Nichols State University is a little college here in town, and Joe, they lavished so much wealth upon me that I felt so guilty that I had to go do something else. That's not true. Oh. I was making crap, and we had three daughters, right?
Yeah.
So and they have the nasty habit of wanting to eat.
Yeah.
And so they,
they just keep eating.
So yeah, I had to go do something else. My wife's a teacher also. She taught English and math, and so I had to go do something else because it was just going to be a rough ride if I didn't. So yeah, I put in applications and I got an interview at MI and passed the math test remarkably. And my wife could have taken it better than I could have, but I did pass it. And so I got a job with MI as a mud engineer ostensibly, but it's like 2001, and my whole mud school was going to be fired by all the guys from the mud school from Harvey and Lafayette. They were going to be, we had to let us go because there was a downturn, right? Yeah. There was no work for us. But the government had these regulations they were putting forward on the discharge of synthetic fluid on cuttings. So we got rolled into something called compliance engineer. So we did these tests on the cuttings. We had to collect data, and it saved our job. I'd have been crawling back to Nichols if he's let us teach some freshman English.
What that last job?
But typically it's like regulations kill jobs, but actually they create jobs. It just puts the onus on the private entity that's being regulated, and they don't like that. So we were all compliance engineers, they called us, or specialists. And but I did mud work on land, got like 2 wells, and did compliance offshore. And my first rig out there was the Marianas Shell. It was a Shell rig. They were a Transocean rig. It was an old floater. But eventually I started like running mud out there. And I did some compliance work on the Deepwater Horizon. And the company man loved to play poker and boo-ray at night. Now, I may have been a good compliance engineer, but I was a religious poker and boo-ray player. So when one of the mud engineers that were on the Horizon left, he asked for me. So that's how I got on the Horizon. And it was like a regular job. Like for 5 years, I was on the Horizon. And before that, well, I'd run mud on other rigs, right?
Yeah.
And there were incidences that did kind of mirror what happened. It's nothing that spectacular or deadly.
Yeah.
But yeah, the Horizon was my home for 5 years, and you're on a rig for 5 years. You get very close to the guys that work there, and so yeah, I was really happy on the Horizon. Although, you have to learn what the rules are.
Yeah,
and kind of learned the hard way. Well, I was probably there for 4 years, right?
Yeah.
And the managers changed on the Horizon. This guy named Johnson came in, and he had a rig that there was a problem. He was talking about how safety first was going to be number one, and it always kind of irked me. Safety first, because how could safety be first if what's second is terrible danger? Yeah. It's not safety first. It's just it's risk, risk management. But I did ask that question. How can safety be first if terrible danger is second? And this Johnson during a meeting, like this guy was like introducing himself. That was a bad move. Because he had brought his safety guy there, like the one that was going to be in the office. And that little fella jumped up. He was leaning on the wall. He jumped up and said, "What do you mean you don't believe in safety first?" I said, "Well, it's not that I don't believe it. I think it's misplaced." But I was sitting right next to one of the clerks. And he and I don't agree at all politically, right? He's a good guy, and he kind of leaned over and said, "Yeah, no, I agree with you. That's kind of crazy." But I learned later from one of the company men, who's a very good guy. He told me, "Look, don't say that again. Don't question that." So those are the rules. That safety first is the religion, and there are no heretics on the rig.
No, because obviously the Horizon, was it under contract the whole time you were on there for BP then?
Yeah, the whole time.
It was always
BP.
BP.
In fact, so it was BP the whole time.
Wow.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we were the exploration rig.
Yeah.
Right. So they needed one rig designated to go drill the new prospects.
Right.
So yeah, we were on a lot of the big finds. They were found by the Horizon. Casquita, I think. Casquita is the deepest oil well, I think. TBD.
Yeah.
At least it was at one point. And so yeah, we would go out and drill the new prospects.
So I went on Thunder Horse, 2013. BP Thunder Horse. Yeah, so it was about 3 years after Macondo. Obviously BP then was not BP as it was prior to that. And one thing I will say is how, and we call it anal, but like strict they were when we were on there after Macondo. I mean, you couldn't go for a shite without them being on your back. You know, they were all over you. Were they like that pre Macondo?
Well, they were kind of pity wise but pound foolish, as the phrase goes.
Okay.
Like there were a lot of hand injuries because people had knives, right? So you couldn't have a knife. You had to use box cutter. And that was like paramount.
Yeah. I know what you mean.
But they would do things like, well, not put a packer in the hole.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. So
right.
to certain things. So I mean, obviously Macondo, how long had you been on your trip when that night happened?
I was actually done. I was supposed to go in the day of.
Oh.
But I felt bad because like Gordon Jones was coming out. He was going to walk right into this shit show. It was a very political time because like all the BP executives and Transocean executives were on the rig. And the company man was like sniggering with fright because he didn't want to look like he's messing up.
Yeah.
And he actually, I had to call Gordon Jones. He had to come out a day early because Don Badrini wanted 3 mud engineers on the rig, right? We had Blair Manuel, who was from Thunder Horse.
Okay.
He was there to help us with the completions. And I was there, but he had to have 3 mud engineers there. Yeah. So, yeah, Gordon Jones had to come out a day early because, his last day with his family.
Yeah.
And that always pissed me off. But he asked me to work over until the well was plugged, and I agreed because I think I was more than happy to it. And actually, we were supposed to have it displaced before Gordon came on tower the next day, our tour. I don't know.
Yeah,
shift.
No, that's so.
And but things got delayed. The negative test was strange, so yeah, it drug on till that night. And I'll never forget that Gordon Jones, I'd been, I don't know, 15, 16 hours or something. And he came on at 2:00. He came on early. And we were waiting to see what they were going to do. And we were in the doghouse, and he put his hand on my shoulder and said, "What the fuck are you still doing up? Get out of here. It's a displacement. I got this." So yeah, he did save my life by sending me to bed.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah,
I think there's one thing that's going to be really tough. Obviously, I can only imagine because it's probably incredibly raw still. Is what happened that night? I mean, when you kind of go through it all, and we mentioned it in when we were speaking just before the podcast started, but it was almost, and it's horrible to say it, but it was the perfect cheese hole situation, wasn't it? I mean, cheese slice or whatever they call it, and whatnot, but almost there's an ounce of luck to the fact that your relief kind of send you to bed to avoid being part of it.
I'd have been right there on the gumbo box with him.
Yeah.
Right. Well, let me. I'll explain it further. I should like.
Yeah. No, it's fine.
Right. The well had other pressures on it. We had to go off Macondo set and run off to the Nile well to complete it, which we'd never done before. And if we didn't get there in time, BP was going to lose the lease, right?
Yeah.
So there's tremendous pressure because they had spent, however millions of dollars drilling the Nile well, and they didn't do anything about it. They're going to lose it. So I believe that was a factor into how much pressure was being put on the rig to finish up the well. And like the morning of, the plan just kept changing. It was like, we were going to do this. We're going to run a cement bond log. And they had Slumberjay out there. But that morning they decided not to. And that tells you how far up the cement is on the casing.
Yeah, on the casing, yeah.
That would have been valuable. Because what they think happened is they landed out the casing, but it's like 6,000 pounds, which was way over tolerance, right? And they think it crumpled the casing. So when that cement job was done, they didn't know, you don't know where the cement is.
No.
The cement bond log would have shown that, right? But when we did the cement job, all the numbers came out. We bumped the plug, as they say. Came back, it looked good on paper. And that morning, we were going to set a mechanical plug in the well, an RTTS, because you always do that. You have a cement job on the bottom, you set a mechanical plug in the middle, and a cement plug on top once you displace all the mud out. And BP decided, since that cement job looked so good, we didn't need to set a plug. If that plug was in the well, well, I'd still be working the oil field, Then none of that would have happened. All those boys would have gone back to their families. Yeah, Gordon Jones would have got to meet his little boy, Max. But because, and I don't want to overstate it, but there was always a great deal of pressure to do the job as quickly as possible. But there was even more so because they wanted to save the Nile well. And I think that had to do with how they went about trying to get off that well, right?
Yeah.
How do I say this? So yeah, like when you are worried about hand injuries, and you make it a big deal to give everybody box cutters instead of knives. That's good. That's okay. But when you make a decision with a very questionable negative test to displace all that mud out on a live well, you have made a gamble with all those men's lives. And I can't help but think, even with all the even with the fact that you could hardly take a crap on the Thunder Horse without some kind of paperwork.
Yeah.
I don't think that would change, because that's an executive decision. Like when BP was defending itself for the civil trial, right, where they were found like criminally negligent, grossly negligent. They developed the idea of the Swiss cheese theory, right?
Yeah.
That you have all these entities and they were creating all these mistakes, all these holes in the cheese. And BP was just on top and it didn't understand all the holes were lining up. But the one hole they left open was the damn well. You know, they were the cheesemakers. They were the cheesemakers for that particular disaster.
What was the company man like? Because obviously what happened, it turned into a film, Mark Wahlberg and stuff, and we'll speak about that in a bit. But in the film, obviously, he was portrayed by, I can't remember the boy's name, but he's a brilliant actor and he's always a bad guy. But,
John Malkovich, right?
There's John Malkovich.
Yeah, John Malkovich, Don Badrini, right?
What was he like?
You know, we were always very lucky with the company men we had. They're all old school, but they're beginning to mellow. Yeah. And a matter of fact, my company man, he was from Gentilly, like a foul-mouthed Italian. Very, very funny. Yeah. Very funny fella. And he would not suffer fools lightly.
No.
And he would push back on the drilling engineers so much, he got sent to Azerbaijan. Yes. But really, we were very lucky in the company that we had. I switched from Don Badrin's hitch to Ronnie Sapavido's hitch. Great old guy. Old Ronnie Sapavido had a face like a bird of prey, right? he was a no bullshit guy.
Yeah.
And for the first 2 years, Ronnie would ask me questions that he knew the answer to.
Right.
To see, he was testing me.
Yeah.
But I liked working for the guy. He was a great guy. And man, I'd much prefer to work with Ronnie than with Don.
Right.
And as it turned out, like Ronnie and Don Badrini were on the rig at the same time. But Ronnie had to go back to town because he had to go to well control school. He had to re-up his certification, right?
Okay.
So he left that Friday and gave us Bob Kaluza, who was from the Thunder Horse. But the thing about the Thunder Horse is they drill the same well every well because they're going into the same formation, right? You got this whole prospect, and they know everything about the pressures and and he hadn't been on an exploration rig before, but that's beside the point because Don Badrini was a 30-year hand, and you should know better.
Yeah.
But so we had the day of the accident, we had questionable competence in the company man position. But again, Don Badrini and Bob Kaluza didn't decide, well, we're not going to put a plug in the hole to make sure the well is dead.
Yeah.
That came from the office.
Right.
But again, that never came out because MMS gave them a dispensation to do it. Right.
Do you think they could have done more to question the office on that decision then?
Yeah. As a matter of fact, like, the Transocean is the last arbiter, right?
Yeah.
And Transocean, the OIM, and Jimmy Harrell was a good old guy. But again, there's political pressure there because Transocean owns the thing that costs money.
Yeah.
And BP owns the thing that makes money.
Yeah.
And BP's paying the rent, right? So Transocean did not want to lose BP as its production company. Because, where's that rig going to go and do? Probably have to go overseas or something. But anyway, so even though there are two company men and maybe one clerk from BP on the rig at every time, they have outsized political pressure, even on Transocean. Because the Transocean, they're the ones that have to get the job done and satisfy the production company. during the pre-tower meeting. It's like at 12 o'clock, and the new crew comes on. A crew. That's the crew that was on when the blowout happened. There were some grumblings about it, but it was said in no uncertain terms by one of the BP company men that this is what we're going to do. And I remember Jimmy Harrell said, he had this really gruff voice. He said, "Well, I guess that's what them big pinchers are for down there." And yeah, it's pretty ominous.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you, I was thinking, my God, we thought we had more time because they were going to do cement bond log, they were going to run the Packer, and they got rid of all that. That all changed in the morning, and so I was worried about, we had to get the mud off, we had to do all kind of crap. So I was worried about that. But yeah, so there were so many things going on. There wasn't a whole lot of time to think about, shit, what are we doing? And I'd like to make a point about safety first versus what's called the critical path. Do you have that phrase in the North Sea?
Yeah, I know what you mean.
The critical path?
Yeah.
Like from the beginning of the well to the end?
Well, yeah.
Yeah, because safety first is what you talk about in the pre-tower meeting. But when you're in the meeting in the morning with the office, it's all about the critical path. I mean, they'll talk about safety a bit, but, how are we going to get down there as quickly as we can? And those two things are in contrast constantly, right?
Yeah.
And when you have a bunch of guys that don't want to have to work at Walmart or, teach English.
Yeah.
They have mortgages, they have children, and there's no entity out there that can protect you if you say something politically incorrect, right?
Yeah.
Because there is no union, right? These guys have no kind of power to foist back onto the executives of both Transocean and BP. And I think that's a great flaw, because I know it might slow things down, but it would make the entire process more, democratic.
Yeah.
You do something incredibly dumb, if the guys could get together long enough to talk about it, and they were unionized, you'd be protected by something. They couldn't just fire you, because they could. Absolutely. And of course, another thing is all these guys are from different companies. I was from AMI, Halliburton, you had Transocean, you had Schlumberger out there. How do you go about even doing that?
Yeah.
And the great thing about, Norway is that their labor unions are so strong that they would fear what the workers would do.
Yeah.
But in the Gulf of Mexico, I'm sorry, Gulf of America.
Yeah.
But yeah, in the Gulf of America, there's no such thing. Matter of fact, it's unheard of here. And South Louisiana in general has a very kind of plantation mentality when it comes to the boss man.
Mm.
Yeah, so it's but I think we desperately need it. And but I don't know how going about it. I've tried, but it's hard to get guys together, for one thing, to talk.
Yep.
And then to actually act, because things like that have been tried in South Louisiana.
Uh-huh.
I remember when the boat hands were trying to start a union, and there were signs all over Lafourche Parish, the parish that I'm in, that there is no U in union. It's a stupid sign, right? But it was put out by this collection of like insurance salesmen and boat companies and grocery store owners called the Concerned Committee for the Community. A very anodyne title. But of course, the union failed.
Yeah.
And all those guys, like, pushing for a union were fired.
Yeah.
So, you're kind of captured in the oil field, certainly in America.
Yeah, no, I think in the UK, we're similar circumstances as well, to be honest. There's no union. There was unions. Obviously, they had their time in the 70s,
Right.
70s, 80s with the coal mines and whatnot, but
So
unfortunately,
they broke them.
yeah, they just broke
Yeah, they broke them.
them. Yeah, so unfortunately,
And there are...
yes, no,
Go ahead.
no, you carry on.
No. Well, there are some humans, like the unions in operation in refineries in South Louisiana, but they're so politically weak
Yeah,
that because I think it was BASF, German company, they did a lockout. Their workers went on strike, and they locked them out, and they broke the union. And yeah, unions are anathema. No one wants to talk about a union in Louisiana.
no, I can't imagine. I think America in general is they're not really kitted out for that. It's funny actually. I'll not name the company. I'm not going to get myself in any trouble, but there was an incident in the North Sea a few years back. I went on the rig. I think I went on the rig not long after. It must have been 4 or 5 years ago, where they went on a bit of a strike. They were fed up with. No, I don't think it was a pay thing. I think it was a rotation thing. I think that rotations had changed. I'm not sure. I can't mind exactly the whole concept of it all. But the rotations had changed, and basically they turned around and they said, and the boys in the control room and they all got together and they said, right, well, we'll just shut the wells and we're not going to produce anymore. But they had to leave guys on fire watch, obviously, and the company. I shouldn't laugh because it's horrible, but this is unfortunately the mentality of some of these super majors, do we say, basically turned around and said, well, it's going to be in the ground there when you open it up again, so we'll leave you to it. And I think yeah, that happened. That's a
go-to strategy.
Yeah, and I think it shows you the. I mean, like I said to you before, I'm not pro oil, I'm not pro renewable, but these companies have so much power in terms of what they can do, and like you say, with regards to the control they have, they're ultimately these companies and this industry dictates everything that happens in a country, because without them, you can't function economically or from day to day life.
Yeah, we have so much power here that our state legislature has an Exxon Day. We celebrate Exxon. let's praise Exxon.
Yeah.
I'm gonna brag on my daughter a bit.
Yeah.
One of my daughters, two of them are history majors. One of them wrote her thesis on an oil strike that took place early 20th century in the Gulf, right? Not in the Gulf, but it was mostly land work, right?
Okay.
And because they were getting paid crap, it was terribly dangerous, and everyone on the drilling side was on strike, but on the production side, which they were paying those guys plenty, like the production companies were paying those guys plenty.
Yeah,
they kept pumping, and all they did was, okay, we won't drill any more wells. How about that? Let these guys starve. And broke the strike. But yeah, there was no solidarity between production.
No.
And I noticed something interesting, because I did go to some platforms that had a drilling package on it, that had H&P, and a production company, and on a production side, I should say. And the OIM was actually a shell hand. It was the Mars and the Ursa.
Yeah.
And I found out that on the production side, those guys are actually Shell employees. They aren't Transocean. They aren't MI.
Right.
And I think that's why they were particularly well paid. I think there's a historical precedence for that, because you could have the drilling side quit and still pump as much oil as you want.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Anyway, and there was a funny story about on that production, on one of the production platforms, I won't name the platform. Like the production side discharged a pit full of soapy water, which is illegal. All right, you can't because it's like covering up a sheen. And they called MMS and told them it was the drilling side because it's H&P.
Yeah.
So again, that need to push liability downward onto someone else is a dynamic that is quite prevalent.
Yeah.
And I am not necessarily, I'm not anti-oil.
No.
It's an inert thing. It's what we do with it and who controls it that I also object to.
Yeah.
But in the oil field, liability is everything.
Oh yeah.
Right. Because they have to get insurance. Right. And I've never seen a safety guy write a report saying, yes, Shell is completely at fault. The safety system is crap, right?
Yeah.
It's always like an individual who did something wrong and has to be foisted down on the individual. But not just even Transocean, just one guy messed up and it's an outlier and everything's fine because the safety system is perfect. It's just we have such goofs that can't follow it. That's kind of like the message that you get. Now, I had some safety guys that I like very much, but that's kind of like the kernel of their job. It's like the pit of their job is to make sure production company is covered.
Yeah.
And I noticed also a transition from, like when I first got on the horizon, there was a BP safety guy, right? That was one of the hands that were on. But as the years went on, they shuffled it off to Transocean. And I wonder if that's still the case. Even your Mr. Scotland, I think, he works for a contractor. He doesn't work for a production company, right?
No, he worked for the drilling company. Yeah.
He sounds like a terrific guy. I'm not saying he's done anything wrong, but then it's like the nature of the job.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
But that's like I said to you earlier, I'm in the wind industry now, and I've noticed that's moved that kind of idea of that protecting kind of the political side of the company is also in very much in wind industry too. It's I think it's very much and as long as there's the amount of money that's pumped into these industries, you're gonna I don't think that will ever change. Personally.
Well, I guess that's the nature of the corporation.
Yeah.
That's the nature of the idea of the corporation.
Exactly.
Is that you have to protect the pile of money you got.
100%.
You don't want to give away the money.
Yeah. No.
Right.
No. 100%.
Right. I think you're right. I think it's a dynamic that spreads across the way corporations work and not particular to the oil field. You're right.
Yeah. I've got a question actually. So is it true that Schlumberger actually got a chopper out to get their boys off?
Well, when they found out they weren't going to run the cement bond law, now, I am not privy to this. This is what I heard. It's like, they called, they wanted to get off the rig.
Really?
I don't know if it was because, I don't know if it was because they thought something dangerous was going to happen or that, well, these assholes got us out here for nothing. Right?
Yeah.
Right. But I'm not sure which.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, but I have heard that somebody said, this thing's going to blow up.
No.
I thought I read something about that, but I didn't talk to any of the Schlumberger guys.
Yeah.
And I didn't hear it on the rig. It was only afterwards in the media, and you can't really trust the media.
Because they all got off. Because obviously in the film, like you see them, they go off, and Mark comes up and say, "Where's Schlumberger going?" The other thing I will say about that movie is I don't know who they were consulting on that chopper ride, but I have never had a conversation like that in my fucking life on a chopper.
No, you're right.
Honestly, when
You could hardly talk of the damn chopper.
See, there must be some serious insulation on this chopper, David.
Oh, absolutely, man. You know, like we had to learn sign language as
Yeah,
soon as you
yeah, you can barely hear it when the pilot comes through to tell you you're landing. You only noticed it because you saw the rig coming up.
That's right. That's right. No, there were a lot of things about the movie, and look, I didn't know the guy Mike Williams, right?
Yeah, Mike
The
Williams.
guy that well, because he was It was like Mark Wahlberg and Jimmy Harrell with the best of friends. But no, I never saw Mike Williams and Jimmy Harrell hanging out.
Yeah, no, I can't imagine a Sparky. We call them Sparkies, obviously electricians and OAMs wandering around the rigs as much as those.
No,
yeah,
he's not the right hand man. He's not the go-to guy.
It's funny because everyone who I've spoken to about that movie, and mainly offshore boys who worked on rigs and stuff like that, we all pretty much say the exact same thing. Like, we've never seen a Sparky with that much power on the rig. He's on the rig floor. He's pretty much in the doghouse meetings. He's nearly discussing what's happening with the well. Like,
Well,
he is a busy Sparky.
Mark had to have his lines, man.
Yeah. But on a scale, yeah. Sorry.
But just one other thing, like, Mike Williams was not a popular guy among the Transocean hands.
Oh, really?
Oh God, he was almost universally hated.
Oh,
yeah, and that's before the whole 60-minute thing. That was like, yeah. And for what I never even spoke to Mike Williams, so I don't know. Just going by the guys I know.
Yeah.
Not a popular fella, but they needed a hero. You need a hero.
Yeah.
And I just want to make one thing clear: he did not save Andrea. They did not jump off. They did not jump off the helideck. No, no. Matter of fact, he jumped off and left her. But she went down to where the lifeboats were, got as low as she could, and so did he, and jumped in. The thing is, they needed a big dramatic moment.
Yeah.
Yes, that's right.
So back to that night. You obviously, as you said, you got sent to your bed by their back-to-back.
Right.
And then, how much of that night can you recall, so to speak?
Well, I was dog tired, but I was also keyed up because, it's just that there was so much political things going on at the time. And I took, when you're on the rig, did you ever take melatonin?
Yeah, I started taking that more and more, Leo. To be honest with you, my sleep is, I don't know what it is. I don't know whether it's because I had too many kids over the years or what, but my sleep has deteriorated over the last few years. So I'm back. Yeah, I am taking melatonin now, like, obviously.
On the rig, man, I had to take some melatonin that night. I had like 2 tablets. And because you never know when they're like loading pipe on and off the rig.
Yeah.
It's pretty tough to sleep.
Yeah.
So I took those melatonin. So when the alarm went off and I hopped out of bed in my underwear, the explosion ripped through the sack rope. And the undogged door they had, like a regular door, was actually at the Transocean's office. You went right to the sack room.
Right.
Those doors blew off, hit poor Wyman Wheeler right smack on, and ripped through the living quarters. So when I was standing there, the walls disappeared. And I could see Ryan Hare after the explosion ripped through the damn living quarters. I could see like Ryan Hare was standing right there. So I struggled to get my pants on. I didn't want to die without pants on, but I was really kind of out of it, and I didn't understand what had happened. Couldn't find my shoes, but we all just went to the cinema room. Then ultimately we went down to where the lifeboats were, And even though, the lifeboats were down here, the rig floor is way up here.
Yeah.
I didn't even see a fire coming out of Well Center then. But as soon as everybody got on the lifeboats and they went to the Damon Banks, thank God Damon Banks was there. But I do remember when we were sitting in the lifeboats, like I didn't see anybody from A Crew, and I said, "Fuck." I will see one guy. Are they all in the other lifeboat? Anyway. Yeah. But yeah, there was not understanding what was actually happening. And I remember in your interview with Mr. Meenan,
Yeah.
he talked about a fella that didn't know if he had the authority to stop pumping the oil or the gas.
Yeah.
Remember that?
Yeah. That was another platform that was tied into it pretty much. That just.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah. So there's a few platforms that all line together, and it was particularly the Clyde. They just kept pumping it.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, there's a guy named Chris Pleasant, terrific guy. I knew him when he was like a roustabout, but he went to subsea. And during the blowout, he went up to the wheelhouse and he was going to press the disconnect because, it's a blowout.
Yeah.
And the captain told him, no, you don't have the authority to do that. And he waited. He waited for, he said, like a minute or 3 minutes, I forgot which. Then he pressed it anyway. But by then, because all that gas had gotten to the diesels, and ignited. That was what the explosion that ripped through the living quarters. But yeah, but it didn't disconnect because it was already dead. And it might have been already dead when he was gonna press it. But that mentality, like there's a fire coming out of Well Center.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I have the authority to stop the job.
Yeah.
Because,
I know.
And from the captain.
Which baffles me.
But it does tell you like what is the important thing on the rig, and that's the money.
Yeah.
So that if I disrupt the critical path, I am going to be the one blamed and made the scapegoat.
But it baffles you when you really think about it from a common sense point of view, okay? Because, and I've had this like I've thought about this and I've discussed this with a couple of you before. Surely at that point things have gone that bad, right? That even if you looked at it from just a commercial point of view and just the financial point of view, right? It would have been cheaper to stop then than to stop too late.
Oh, absolutely. You just latched back on.
Exactly.
And tried to kill the well. That's right.
So you think just at some point, even with all these systems in place and whatnot, there's got to be a bit of a financial common sense in there where had you latched off the well there, one, you would have saved a hell of a lot of rig damage, potentially. Two, you would have
saved the entire rig.
Would have saved, two, like just not from an ethical point of view, but only from financial point of view, because obviously, let's be honest, ethically, the whole thing could have been stopped like prior, and they would have saved loads of lives and blah blah blah. But from financial point of view, is rig damage would have been less. The well damage would have been easier to sort the well back out. There would have been a lot less of a spill cleanup and all that kind of. And you just think to yourself, why? I know obviously because I'm not in that position, but surely you just want to stop that straight away from the. Even if you didn't have an authority, just based on them terms alone.
And yeah, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. But from all the previous things that had happened before that, like how the way things were done was always top down, right? And even the company men, one day I went into Ronnie Sapavano's office and he was on the phone and he was like, yeah, yeah, okay, right, click. He was on the phone with the drilling engineer and he looked at me and said, we're just errand boys out here. Sapavano and Ronnie knows all kind of crap. He was like much smarter than these guys.
Yeah.
But again, so yeah, I can see why the captain would be concerned, because that is not the way things are done.
No.
You know, you're told from from the Mount Olympus of oil, when to do, what to do, and that wasn't in the playbook.
No.
Although you were absolutely right, Chris Pleasant was right in trying to unlatch. All right.
Yeah.
And I know, like, all kinds of things were said about Transocean that poor maintenance, and I'm sure it was true. But the dead man did function. You know, like all BOPs have the dead man. Like if they lose power, they're going to close.
Yep.
And they did. They did function. But the pipe pressure, the differential, when that pipe was full of water and all that mud was on top, on the YouTube, like other side.
Yeah.
It buckled and it broke, and it shoved another length of pipe up into BOP. And the dead man will cut one, but it was not going to cut two. And so it still had a flow, and that's why it kept flowing, even though the dead man functioned.
How long did it take you to get off the rig that night?
It seems, I don't know. I guess once the decision was made, it didn't take us long at all. But in fact, we started like getting into the boat. We had to stay there for a while. We were all playing. Like poor Kathleen was sitting next to me, and we prayed. What else you got to do? I remember they brought that Transocean executive in, and he had a terrible gash on him, Mr. Trahan, I think. And so, yeah, I knew that there were certainly injured people, but it seemed like a long time. But what are you going to do? It is a process. It's not and I told you about the knife thing, right? Like, no one can have a knife. Well, when some of the last folks were getting into one of the life rafts, one of the blow up rafts, they were tethered. They were tethered to the damn rig, and no one knew where the knife was in the life raft, and no one had a knife because you couldn't have a knife because you couldn't have a knife. So it does, like, the best laid plans, right? It is ridiculous. It's just the absurdity of how things play out, like what their intentions are and how they actually confound what happens. But yeah, they almost went down because they couldn't find a knife. Eventually, they found the knife, though.
That was the first part of my episode with Leo. Over the two episodes, we kind of discussed the incidents, the events. And the first one is, as you just heard, and the second one we go into kind of what happened post. Again, quite an emotional episode, I found. I remember Deepwater Horizon, watching it on the TV when I was a bit younger, and as spoken about in the episode, I found myself on the Thunder Horse, which wasn't too far away from it at the time. So yeah, I'm looking forward to putting out the second one, and I hope you guys have enjoyed it too. And if you have, please do not be scared to share it, subscribe to the channel, get it out there. And also, if you're interested in coming on, please get in touch with the show. I love nothing more than to get the men and women out there on the show and get them talking about their experiences. Until then, we go again.